Today, we have Sandra with us, who is celebrating the 1 year anniversary of releasing When the End Comes. Super excited to chat about that and everything she is passionate and inspired by. Passionate about and inspired by. Sandra, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really excited to chat. I am, most of the time when I talk to people, we are talking about the struggle of starting in the process of trying to start.
Yeah.
And today we are talking 1 year after the thing you had set out to do had been released, which is, I think, part of the lesson that it doesn't stop. Um,
Yeah, it's ongoing.
right? There's yeah, there's a level of upkeep and more work and what do I do next and all that fun stuff that gets thrown on top of hey, I did the thing. And if you thought you had imposter syndrome before, try wait until you're competing against your past self who did something already. That's
Oh.
okay.
Yeah, totally. That's absolutely true.
Awesome,
I
great.
could
It's
tell you
not.
that.
I was. If you had said no, I'd have been sad because it would mean it's just me. But it's not. That's great.
No, it's absolutely not you. It's just you. It's just what happens. Is
Yeah.
you have this something you created, and then
And
what?
then what? Like good, bad, or indifferent, right? Like, if I mean, if it doesn't, if no one responds to it, you can tell yourself that no one knows you exist, so it doesn't count yet. But
Yeah.
if it, then you just go, okay, I'll do it again. Uh, but if or if there's like negative press, or even if there's good press and it goes really great, now you're like cool, and they want more from you. Like 10 seconds after it's done, they want cool. What's next? Gimme, 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 gimme.
Yeah.
There's
What are you planning? What are you doing? What is your
yeah,
work in progress? I
yep,
have no idea.
yep. That was Do you know who Kevin Smith is, the filmmaker?
No.
Okay. Well, he's an indie filmmaker who was made his fame in the early '90s or mid '90s, and then like his claim to fame now is holding on to the nostalgia of his fame from the mid '90s. He still makes films. He does a lot, but like most of his stuff is like podcasting and talking to people that loved his movies and about movies and filmmaking. But he talks about how after he wanted to make one movie and he made the one movie and he felt really good and the rest of the world went, so what are you going to do next? And he went, I have no idea. So the rest of his career has been realizing that you have to keep outrunning yourself. Like you have to keep doing the next thing, otherwise the world
Hmm.
forgets.
Oh, that's a terrifying
Isn't it?
realization, though.
Yeah. Yep. So what's I've been talking a lot. I apologize. What was your journey like? Where the game is hugely inspiring and super cool. Where did you get your ideas from? What inspired you to try and make it yourself? What was that journey like for you?
Um, it actually, I'm quite new to the TTRPGs. I started playing in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Started with Dungeons and Dragons, but as with a lot of things in my life, if I get fascinated by something, or dare I say it, obsessed by something, um, I want to figure out how it works. So it usually playing and running games isn't enough for me. I want to figure out how it works. So for me, the way to do that was to try to create a game. Um,
Mm.
I did a small kind of solo journaling thing, but because it can be anything you want, anything you can make up. Um, I got the suggestion from someone to start creating things through game jams.
Mm.
So that journaling game ritual actually came to be through a game jam. And when the end comes, started the same way actually. I I am really into horror,
Okay.
especially horror literature,
Yeah.
um, and horror TTRPGs. I mainly play Vampire the Masquerade, Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green at the moment, um, Liminal as well, and I wanted to make something in that genre,
Hmm.
and I was thinking, how can you create a slasher TTRPG?
Yeah.
Because
Without it just being
um,
stab die.
yeah, and then if you die in the first half hour, then you have 2 more hours just sitting sitting there having nothing to do because your character's dead.
Right.
Um, so um, when I came across this game jam for the Breathless SRD from Ferrari RPGs, um, René Pierre made a game called Breathless, which was a survival horror game with a bit of a sliding scale in how it handles skills and how it handles the survival rate of the chances of survival for your character.
Being 0.
Exactly. Um, and I thought, okay, this is a really cool system, really cool idea to try to make a slasher game in, because it gets harder and harder to survive. Um,
Ah.
so I did this. I tried to come up with ideas, and um, I was still looking for that way to not having a character die and then it just ends for the character and for the player at the table. Um, so in that, I think in that period of time, there was the Black Phone was released, the horror movie based on a short story of by Jonah Hill of Joe
Okay.
Hill.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and in that movie or in that story, it's about a young boy who's being uh, been kidnapped by a murderer, and he's locked up in a basement. And in that basement, there is this black phone on the wall, and that phone starts ringing, but it cannot start ringing because the cord is cut. So it
Oh.
should not be ringing. And throughout the movie and throughout the story, you hear or you understand that the persons on the other side of the phone are the previous victims of this killer. Um,
Mm.
so he gets suggestions and ideas how to escape or to connect with others. And I thought that's a really cool idea. You have this ghosts or spirits helping the people who are still alive.
Yeah.
So I just that clicked. That was for me the
Yeah.
step that I thought, okay, this is the way I can still do the slasher or slasher idea, killer idea, um, but don't have character or don't have players sit idly by when the character dies.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
so it's
yeah, that's cool.
yeah, so it's a combination actually of just sheer luck of seeing such inspiration coming by, and already working on a very interesting system as well. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, that makes
mhm.
sense. That's really cool. That's what was it? What is it that draws you to horror as a genre? Um I I ask because I don't believe I enjoy horror as a genre. Mostly in that I do not like the feeling of being scared.
Mm,
Uh but I do like the story beats that horror uses to entice you in storytelling.
yeah,
Um, so as a storyteller and a GM, I am mostly a comedian. I'm a fool. I am full chaos gremlin and silliness and slapstick. But because of that, I still need there to be stakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need something to overcome. You need a reason to want to do something. It's not just pratfalls and fighting monsters that are shaped sideways. There's a reason that these things are happening that makes it like you're laughing, but you're also like on guard. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's the tension.
And because of that, actually, and I learned this from interviews talking to people talking to Jordan Peele. Uh, and he talks about how comedy and horror actually use the same story beats, cinematically. Not so much written, but cinematically and vocally. That you would get from a comedian, you get the same thing from horror. And the thing he likes to point to, and a couple other people like to point to, is the first Ghostbusters movie. In
Mm.
that, in that, if you watch the first Ghostbusters movie with the sound off, it's a thriller ghost haunting film that happens to be haunting the entire city. And if you watch that without knowing it and you're a kid, it's terrifying. It also has beats that make you laugh and are corny and that kind of stuff. But the jokes are tied into the horror, and that is
Mm.
something that I've always meshed into when I'm trying to tell a story. I use lots of adjectives. I'm very descriptive. I set the tone and the whatnot to so the stakes are dire, and then
Mm.
I give you things that just go sideways. Uh, because that's hilarious to me. Like I think you mentioned in one of your tweets that like the most a staircase is like the most difficult challenge for a party. For me, it's getting them to cross the street. So I, so I
Oh.
have, yeah. So I run Mission Quest, which
Mm-hmm.
is my exercise infused tabletop game, um, that is built on my silliness and my DM style. So it's serialized. Each new mission is fun and like a thing you got to do, and there's a stakes of either failing or succeeding. But it's built to create chaos you have to overcome by creating chaos in the world by accident. Like it's a collision course of yeah. And the most
Mm-hmm.
difficult thing the players ever had to do was walk across the street and pick up a bag and take it home. Uh, and that's all they had to do. When you really got down to it, was they had the one of their magical items had been left, and the magical item was a bag. They were giants on this island compared to them, and they had to take two steps because they're giants. Pick up the tiny bag and portal home. That's all they had to do. And instead, they destroyed the town by walking. They made all the settlers mad, so they got into a war with them. Like it was a thing. Like it was, and so like the simplest of silliness tasks is going to create that chaos for me. But I use the horror beats to create stakes that otherwise wouldn't be there. I realized this.
Yeah.
I asked a question and then just monologued over it. But
Oh
so
no, no,
for
I
you, where does
understand it
that horror
completely.
come? Where did the horror concept come from for you? Where did you get into that?
It's funny because I say I like horror as a genre. I do actually. I've been reading Stephen King since I was 10, I think, and if earlier I read Fear Street and all these young adult horror thriller genres. That has always been my go-to. Um, and the same as with the horror TTRPGs, but I do not watch horror movies.
Oh.
Exactly the same reason why you say you should watch Ghostbusters without sound. I don't think that the horror should come from jump scares.
Yes, just
I
like humor
really
shouldn't
hate
come from
that.
pratfalls.
Exactly. It's just oh, I hate that so much because the way I consume horror movies at the moment is people always laugh about that because it's kind of a weird way, but I watch the trailers um with the volume very low so I
Mm-hmm.
cannot get spooked by a sudden sound. And then I read the synopses on Wikipedia
Yeah.
to just grasp the idea of exactly those story beats to see how that movie is constructed,
Mm-hmm.
how with what terrible things a creator has come up with. just as inspiration, but without having to deal with those jump scares. I don't think that's even
No,
if
they
there's
have.
only
I
one
will
in a
argue. I will
movie,
say
it's
they do
just
have. I will say jump scares do have a place. Just like ever so often, someone falling downstairs is funny.
yeah.
But I basically completely agree. That makes complete
Yeah.
sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So and for
Yeah.
me, the horror shouldn't be from a physical. It's a physical reaction that I get when I hear a loud
Yes.
sound. So it's and that's me getting scared, or that's me not feeling comfortable with in that situation. Um, but when I run horror games or play them, what interests me most is what do people do in the most dire of situations. Um,
You
I'm
revert to your lowest level of training is what happens.
you go to your basic instincts.
Exactly.
I've been running a Vasen session last week, and that uses uh, that has a mechanic it's called fear. If you see a Vasen, so a supernatural being, and you never had encountered that, if you have never not encountered that before, you roll a fear check, and it if you fail that fear check, you become terrified, um, and you have 3 or 4 responses: freeze, fight, fly, flee, or I forget the fourth one. I think those are the basic responses.
Yeah. 100%.
So that's for me. It's more interested to see which situations I can place the characters in, or I can place players in sometimes even, where they have to respond to these urges, to respond to see how would my character react in this situation?
Yeah.
How would maybe even how would I react in this situation?
Yeah. Or
Um,
making them react in that situation.
yeah, you have
Like
to react
when
in
you're
that
when you're
situation.
struggling to count the numbers on your dice, you know you're doing something right. That's we have Mimics Memphis in the chat says even though fear and excitement are two sides of the same coin. Okay, I'm gonna so that's a statement that I use a lot because
Hmm.
technically in our nervous system, fear and excitement are literally the same physical prognosis. The change is whether or not you believe you are being chased or whether you believe you are chasing something.
Yeah.
Um, and my example comes from stand up and like the fact that literally everyone feels what we call stage fright, but some people go, "Woo, yeah, this feels great," and want to hop on stage, and some people go, "Oh, it's gonna kill me," and want to run away from stage. So to answer that, the reason that I don't like being scared, even though fear and excitement are the same side of the coin, is because my response to fear is freeze.
Yeah.
Uh, so when I'm afraid or feel like I'm being chased, instead of running away or fighting it, I just stand there and go, "Oh my God, what's gonna happen?" And I don't like that feeling that makes me feel that helpless.
Yeah.
However, uh, I love the feeling excitement, and I will run towards it. So my whole game is fixing my brain when I think I'm afraid to find a positive reason to run towards it, because otherwise I feel like I'm gonna die. So that is why, even though I recognize that fear and excitement are the two sides of the same coin, I don't enjoy being afraid, and thus don't like watching scary movies because my response to it is to freeze, and then like I can't get away because the movie's still happening, and that's just not a fun situation.
When I run games as a GM, especially horror games, I always start my session with saying, um, if there's something in this game or coming up in this session that you don't feel comfortable with as a player, please tell me. I'm very precise in using safety tools, and
Mm-hmm.
because especially with a horror game, and as but when the end comes, it's the same. Um, your character should be scared, should be uncomfortable, should sometimes even be unsafe. You as a player, you not
Right.
in no way, shape, or form. you should feel excited to figure out what is going on. You should maybe feel a little bit of maybe a bit nervous to see what happens. How do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
react to that? But it's more
yeah,
of excited feeling of what's gonna happen, more that
yeah.
tension.
Rather than worried that something bad is gonna happen. Yeah,
Yeah, that's something I do not like. Um, I do not like stirring up in someone. Um,
hmm
Especially because I have the same reaction. If something does go into my triggers, I freeze.
yeah.
I just luckily it doesn't happen that often because I'm blessed with amazing people I play with and GMs. So, but yeah, it does happen sometimes, and I just figure out that that's the reaction I get, and I don't want to instill that on someone else.
We have a good question and from Mimics as well. Do you think games could mimic the horror movies, where you never see the big evil bad thing and leave it to the player's imagination? Uh, this was actually something I was going to bring up earlier when we were talking about the jump scares. I don't know if they could. I think it'd be great if they did. Uh, like if you the best part of like the original Halloween is the anticipation, not not that like as soon as the actual stabbing happens, you've burst that bubble, and it can happen again. But in order for that same sensation to be ramped up, you sacrifice that anticipation with more of the slashing.
Yeah,
Um, the feeling of is it behind me, what's happening, where they're gonna pop out, and not letting it pop out is uh uh the big part of what draws in the in my opinion the ambiance of
yeah,
a good horror story. Um,
yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, the funny thing is that one of the first streams I did, I think it was with our RPGs Uncovered, um, they actually never got to the killer.
Oh yeah.
It was it was so funny, and it also had to do with some. I thought that would get there. We would get there eventually. It was a story about a cabin in the woods idea.
Yeah,
Um,
classic.
but this was a holiday home, perfectly situated in a forest next to a lake, and the players came up with, "Oh, we're going to do on a work retreat." So they were employees of I think it was a restaurant or something like that. It was a weird bunch. Um, but I think the only no, they didn't encounter the killer eventually. Actually, one of the characters at the end died because of someone they haven't seen at all.
Oh.
Um, and the story was it was an ex-employee of the restaurant. Uh, but they never got to that point. Everyone died or was able to flee before the slashing happened or the killing happened. And that's where the joke also comes from with the stairs. The second
Yes.
death was because I it's also quite difficult because I have 6 stats in the game, and if you roll a 1 or a 2 on a die, you get stress, and if you gain your 3rd point of stress, you die. But it
Oh.
also means, yeah, it goes very fast. Um, but if you die on intellect check, for instance, how does that look like? What does that? How do you do that? Um, so
Oh.
I think in that story or in that situation, it was more like, okay, you're very distraught about um, seeing one of your coworkers dead on the floor, and you try to go down the stairs with a heavy bag, but you don't see. It's dark because all the lights were out, so you don't really see what's before in front of you. So you just fall down the stairs and you break your neck.
Oh wow.
A lot of
I love
funny
it.
thing, a lot of the deaths are stair induced in my games,
Yep.
apparently. So yeah, I think a lot of the games I have run until now have had that killer maybe only at the end, or uses a more supernatural approach. So you feel things are off and things are not what they're supposed to be. But
Oh, so you're questioning your own reality.
yeah, that and that in that particular game, they were in a haunted hotel where
Why can't it just be a hotel? Why is the hotel that's an empty hotel is creepy enough if it's not haunted.
but we have so much inspiring ghost stories here in
That's so true.
Amsterdam, so why not use it?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think the stairs there became this never-ending stairway. Up until the point that the ghost thought, okay, now it's enough. I really want to finish them off.
No.
So now you can go to the basement. Um, so yeah, I think I actually run a lot of games without an actual killer. To be
I like
honest,
that. I like that a lot. That's awesome.
so it can be done if it's the. It also gives, I think, it gives the players much more agency.
I agree.
Um,
I'm a big believer in that, and mostly again for knowing that um, if the more the players have the freedom to interact with the world, the more likely they are to mess it up and have to clean up that mess.
exactly.
So I rely on that more than I rely on random encounter charts.
Oh, I don't use those things.
because because it makes when the thing you're now fighting that is directly due to the decision you made before that you thought was the solution that looked like at the moment the right thing, that stake is now amplified because you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I run a Vampire the Masquerade Chronicle. We had a session yesterday. I've been running that for we had a second year anniversary last week for that as well. And um they are still it was never meant to be a chronicle, never meant to be a campaign. It was meant to be a two-shot. Uh but the group was so amazing and it was so much fun. So we kept on playing. But yesterday we had session 44. Yeah. And they're still solving things they encountered in session 2. I sometimes I have a co-storyteller for that one, and we just sometimes just come up with one thing and we just write it down and say to each other, okay, this is going to give us enough material for the next 10 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
We can just sit back and
Yep.
see chaos unfold.
Yep. Yeah. You gotta work on your poker face, but other than that, you get yeah, absolutely.
So cool.
So we're in the process of developing when the end comes, um what was the timeline from hey, I have this idea to other people being able to get it?
It was quite short actually. I think I had 6 weeks or something like that, because with that game
Wow.
jam you just have a deadline.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So it was, and I luckily I came across that game, the assignment or the game jam quite early. So I think 6 weeks. But the idea for using those Ghost only came in when I was working on it for, I think it came when I was 3 weeks in or something like that, 2 weeks
Okay.
in.
Yeah.
But I usually take a lot of time to think about things, just to have them in my head and just sleep on it. And if I have the whole idea, I just can put it on a page. I did do some playtests though, because I was struggling with a couple of things. I was using an SRD, so there was this system, but I tweaked it a little bit, and I was figuring out if these adjustments were working. And I'm always really bad at coming up with endings for things, so I
Mm-hmm.
cannot do that. Um, so I was struggling with, okay, what happens when someone is a ghost, and what can they do? What is I wanted to have those ghosts do something different, feeling different than when the character is alive. Um, so I ran a playtest with a couple of people I encountered over the years, um, and who have been playing with a lot. And they also gave me very interesting feedback and ideas as well. Um, so that was interesting to see. Okay, I'm gonna run this game with a rule set that's only half half finished, and see what happens uh, when we encounter problems, and what solutions maybe we can come up with. And it's the same now. I released it a year ago, but kept on. I was fortunate enough to be able to play and run the game on streams, but with my friends as well, and other people were running it for their friends and giving me feedback. And um, so not only did I release scenarios last week, but I also released some revised rules. I adjusted
Hey,
some
so
rules.
you got like a an expansion pack and a version 2.
Yeah, it just I changed some rules especially for the ghost, because in I wanted to make it a little bit more. The flow was a bit weird with some of the extra roles I put in there. So I simplified it, and that works way better. But I tried to out those rules in the last year just to see if it if it worked. So I just
Awesome.
kept on, yeah,
Yeah,
just
I love it.
developing.
Um, what was I gonna say? Oh, prior to finding the jammer period, uh, had writing or designing things been in any way, shape, or form a skill of yours, or something you had developed as
Designing,
like
no. Writing, yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Um, I've been writing my whole life, just like reading was my favorite thing to do as a child. Um, and writing was also one of the things. It's the same thing. I read these awesome stories, and I wanted to do do it myself as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so in everything that in every hobby that I have, or everything that I do in life, I want to figure out how it works.
Me
And
too.
that's just by doing it. It just
That's literally the type of nerd I am. That's my
yeah.
nerdiness.
Oh, that's
I'm not tied to a specific fandom or
yeah,
activity. I just have this compulsion to recreate the sense of joy I get from taking in
yeah,
something new.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I
And
want to be
it
able
for
to do
me,
it for myself when I want.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the same. I do have it boiled down to the thing that I think that I'm triggered by. That is stories,
Yeah.
and how people deal with that, how people communicate as well. But whether it's reading, writing, music, as well, theater.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a dramaturg. I did master's dramaturgy. Pro wrestling, for instance, as well.
Yeah.
It's all something in those things, telling that story
Mm-hmm.
triggers me in a way, and I want to discover all these different forms of storytelling.
Yeah. That's awesome. I relate to that heavily. I consider myself a storyteller, not so much a writer. Um, and I also consider myself a comedian. But I haven't performed in a long time. But but the I switched from writer to storyteller because um, specifically the uh, writing to fill that creation void wasn't
Mm,
something that I did unless I had outside stimulus. So like so I was really good at creating stories when given the prompt and told to do it. But I did not, and I still don't have a my work ethic is physical, not mental emotional.
mm,
So if you give me work that requires me to like run up and down and do it, I will do it all day long. But if you give me work that requires me to create it from scratch from inside my head, I hit a blank wall, and that
mm,
makes me bored, and I go off and do something else. Um, and so I stopped using the term writer when I learned that even though I could fathom stories and tell them very well and share them and find components that would make them great, um, uh, I lacked the natural will and development of someone who like journals every day just because they want to
mm.
journal. If that makes sense.
I cannot
And,
do that as.
yeah. And I remember talking to some people who were comedy writers. They weren't stand-ups. They would write like for sketches or for the internet or whatever. And they talked about how they started writing when they were in like middle school and they were given a journal assignment and they just never stopped journaling. And that's when I was like, oh, like this is like as good as I am at telling stories and like finding a punchline and dissecting comedy. I have like a 30-year backlog of not working this skill.
Mm,
So as much as I see stories or can fathom stories, I cannot fathom the translation from my brain to the text as well as someone else
mm.
that is a writer. And
Yeah,
that's when I switched from calling myself a writer to a storyteller. Uh, for that very
I
specific
understand
reason.
that. Yeah, I understand that. I would not call myself. I do call myself a writer sometimes, but I just say I write. But
Yeah.
it doesn't really. It makes it easier if it is for something specific. I
Yes.
do like writing my notes for GM prep. I do like coming up with whole booklets for storytelling, for when I'm creating a setting. I do like as a dramaturg, for instance. Sometimes I had to compile these booklets full of interesting stories or articles, scientific researches on a certain topic. Um, that's what I find interesting because it has a goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's being used afterwards. Um, and it interacts in a way. People get to use the information, get to use what I have written, and come up with their own their own
Yeah.
thing afterwards, or using that. And it's so fun to see bits and pieces of the information you have given, or coming back in their stories as well. For me, stories is communication. That's why I wanted to I did theater studies, and that's one of the main things I was interested in. How does theater, how does a performance communicate with the audience?
Mm.
Um,
Hey, wrestling's great for that.
oh, it's so cool. That's what triggered me the most. I was at the time, I've been in theater since I was 12, I think, and I still am. I work for a theater company. Um, but at one point, I just didn't feel that that connection was there anymore. You just go sit in the auditorium, you watch the performance, you go out, maybe have a conversation or two, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking. This is the same as with TTRPGs. I was pretty late in my life that wrestling came into it. I in the Netherlands it's not that big, so
Okay.
we don't have it on the television.
Okay.
I saw it. I think around 2012 there were some bits and pieces on some Eurosport channel,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't understand what it was at all. It's so weird. If you don't have any grasp of what it is, it's just so weird to watch.
Yeah.
And it was around the time that in the WWE the Shield came along.
Yep.
So I fast forward 5 years. 5 years ago, I was 5 years ago. I was interested. I was looking for something new to discover, and I was looking around on YouTube, and some name popped into my head. I thought, okay, there was something about an Undertaker
Yep.
and a triple H
H.
or something like that.
Yep.
And I just put those two words into YouTube. And the first match that came up was that Hell in a Cell match between those two with Shawn Michaels as guest referee on one of the WrestleManias.
Is that the one that Triple H got thrown on a bunch of tacks?
Ooh. Yeah, I think it is. And I had no clue what I was looking at. I had no idea. But what triggered me was the reaction of that full stadium.
Yeah, just oohing
All
and awing
those
the whole way.
people. And I thought, you clearly can see this is, it's not totally fake because this hurts. But I couldn't grasp why people would be so invested in that. But by that, I was invested as well.
And trying to figure it out.
I tried to figure it out, the same as I do always do.
Yep.
So what happened then was I started watching. I think I watched all the Raws and SmackDowns from 2012 up until that point,
Oh
2018.
yay! That's a lot of TV.
Yeah, because those were on YouTube, still not on Dutch television. And I got to look around here in the Netherlands to see if there was anything similar. And luckily, we do have 3 small promotions here.
Oh, sweet.
One of the biggest is Pro Wrestling Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And they have an academy. So silly old me thought, okay, I haven't gone to the gym in 10 years. Let's try to work out a little bit and see what happens. That didn't go really well. I did try out. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I started training, and then my knee buckled.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not gonna be a wrestler, but I'm still involved. I'm still I'm a ref at this moment. I'm a
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah.
So it's so amazing to be in that ring and to feel that energy and to talk to the boys and girls about what story you're going to tell and how to hear the reaction. And they're just amazing people as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely because I and it may or may not still happen someday, but I get the same creative juices flowing in my brain from the idea of pro wrestling as I do from DMing or playing tabletop games.
Yeah.
And the only difference is that in one, I don't have to be a stuntman to perform it.
Yeah.
And,
you don't have the physical limitations.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember after the world shut down, um, as part of physically working through the grief of the studio my wife and I had closing. Um,
Mhm.
all the equipment was in our home, so I was still working out. But the goal was to get back into the shape it was in, basically before we had to shut down, so that I would be in enough shape to attempt pro wrestling school once the world opened up and I could try it. And along the way, I ended up bumping into performing tabletop games online, and
Mhm.
that one did not require me to get concussions. So, so I went with that one because it was a more immediate fix. Um, but there was during that period there was the ring psychology is the thing that is so beautiful.
Mm.
I don't know if you found them. You if you, through the classes you've probably talked about it, but there was a sequence of seminars that Al Snow gave that
Mm.
have been recorded on the internet for
Yeah.
places. And I was never a fan of his characters, but hearing him talk about the industry, I was like, oh, I get this. This makes sense. And the way he describes the pacing and the purpose of where you are in the match and what it means to the audience is so amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and the fact that like it's not here's one thing where he talks about how like uh the goal is for the biggest reaction from the audience to be the end of the match or like right before the end of the
Yeah.
match.
Yeah.
So like if you if you get to this stadium and the bell rings and that's when they pop the loudest, you should leave.
Yeah. Then you're
That's
done.
the end of the
Then you're
match. You're
done.
done. Don't even just like pin someone and walk away. You did your
Yeah.
job. Uh and the fact that it's the reason that you chain moves together or like have rest spots or like it's all this it's the same thing as the killer not killing anyone yet. It's the same idea as those beats of this is you're building the anticipation and taking it away and taking it away and hopefully you hit it in a spot where they're not seeing it coming because then
Yeah.
it's not just a jump scare, it's you're tied into that emotional beat.
Yeah.
uh so yeah, I love that hits me so hard there.
It's so inspiring. It's just it's the same way. Not only look at horror movie. It's the same with when you analyze theater plays.
Yeah.
You have this 3 act structure or 5 act structure, and there
Yep.
is this line, and you have also hero's journey. That's also a thing, of course, but um, you work towards a climax,
Yeah.
and people, the protagonist gets through obstacles and obstacles, and you at one point you think they cannot win anymore, they cannot go any further, or it's going to crash down, everything is going to crash down. And when that happens, or when they overcome that point, that climax, that catharsis, that pop in
Yep.
pro wrestling,
Yep.
that's just, it's such a delicate thing,
It
but so
is.
interesting.
It really
It's
is.
so interesting. It's also a discussion. It's also we've been talking about that, or I know that that's a thing for bookers to promoters who make cards for wrestling shows. Um, there's also a dynamic in that one. Which match do you set, put on the
Where
card
and when
where,
and yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is going to be a main event? But if you do the
Yep.
main event, then you cannot do a lot of flashy stuff, and that it's very intricate.
Oh, very much
Um,
so. I love it. And
it's
that's
so
where
cool.
the nerd brain kicks in. You just want to analyze everything.
It's oh, it's terrible actually, because that was the thing why when in theater, um the first thing I saw in theater was the Sound of Music, and it snowballed from there, and I went did a bachelor in theater studies, and you learn a lot about analyzing theater. So you're expected to see a performance or maybe two in a week, and analyze it to death.
Yeah.
in a way.
Yep. Yep.
And after I think at the end of my first year, beginning of my second year, I didn't want to go anymore because I lost my. I went to the theater because it made me feel things. I went to the theater because it was fun. It was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me different perspectives on different voices to hear and to see what they were doing. But if you have to analyze everything, that's the only way of looking at it at a certain point. I couldn't go
Yeah.
to the theater for fun
Yeah.
anymore. Even if I went to the theater, just not for studies, but just for me, I couldn't take off those scientific or these analytic glasses.
Yeah. And just like being it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it developed in something. Now I have this kind of button that I do see the things that I don't like, and I understand why I don't like them. But even if it's a bad performance in the theoretical sense, I can still enjoy myself.
That's
And
good.
that's the same thing with pro wrestling. I'm still at that point that everything is cool and everything is
It's new
so
and
I'm really
shiny, and you gotta
wary.
learn it. And yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There
So
is.
that's
This is gonna sound like it doesn't tie in. But I promise it does. So I find what you're describing very interesting. In the like getting really into it, and then getting so far into it that you can only see the parts that need work, not the parts that you enjoy. Yeah.
yeah,
So that
exactly.
is something that in my line of work as a wellness coach uh, affects a lot of people, and I've talked about this in the last couple episodes. When exercise is tied to their body image, and there is a point in which, like, if you get into the gym and it feels good, and you like what the sensation that you're doing, or the way it makes you feel outside of the gym, that is fantastic, and you're chasing that feeling, and in as a result, maybe things are changing in your body as well. Um, but when you start going, hey, if I work this much at this amount of pace, eating this amount of food, by this point I'll look this way. Uh, you
Mhm.
no longer feel the workouts. You no longer feel the endorphins don't kick in. The little animal, like, you don't get that. The whole host of benefits that exercise actually provides goes out the window,
Yeah,
and instead all you see is the things that are wrong with your body, and you can't. And so it's the an extreme aversion. But this is I bring this in because I believe the process of exercise relates to any other process that we go through, uh,
oh
and in skill development and input output and psychology. Uh,
yeah,
but what you were describing is that same idea
yeah,
of you've decompartmentalized this idea so much that all you see is the parts that need improvement, and you can't feel the joy from the parts you're succeeding at, and it becomes this
yeah,
little nugget of just self hate, which overrides all the 90% of good that comes from it, and it's not
yeah,
fair.
yeah. No, no, no. That's it's the same. It was funny. I promise also this going to tie into this, but it was an article that I read a couple of days ago. It was a Dutch article, and it was about someone who says, "I feel I have no ambitions. I want to work. I have a wonderful job. I'm doing all the things that I need to do. I'm earning enough money. I have a wonderful life, but I don't have ambitions. If a manager asks me if I, on a yearly review, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Um, I, he said, I don't want to be a manager. I'm fine where I'm at. I
Yeah.
don't know what I
Yep.
even don't know what I want to eat tomorrow. So how would I know if what I want to be in 5 years? Because and I totally agree because that was the same thing I said a couple of years ago to my manager, who also came in with that question, like, yeah,
Yep.
Sandra, where do you want to be in 5 years or in 10 years? Do you want to be a manager, or do you want to be? And I told him, I have no idea, because when you focus so much on that one thing, you
Mm-hmm.
don't see all the other wonderful things that maybe can happen.
Yep.
If I had only been focused on, yeah, I want to be a manager, or I want to be this or that, or want to achieve this, all the other wonderful things that I have now probably wouldn't have happened, because when I'm focused on one thing, I'm focused on that one thing.
Yeah.
So that takes over my whole life.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll even.
So
Oh, yeah. You go. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so that's for me. It's the same. I had the same thing with working out myself. My goal was to go do that tryout for wrestling. And when I got there, it was amazing. I did a tryout, went really well. And the first training afterwards, I busted up my knee.
Yep.
Couldn't train for half a year actually, but didn't work out as well.
Mm-hmm. Because the reason you were
Because
doing it was gone.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to see the other benefits
Mm-hmm.
that I'd had before. I felt good. I felt wonderful actually. I Yeah, so that was a rough thing to go through, because the reason was gone. So
Yeah.
why keep up with that?
Yep. And there were a lot of people that uh have learned to motivate themselves with I'm gonna say exercise, but work, through very static goals. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, I'm gonna run this race. Oh, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna join a sport that makes me stay active. Ooh, I'm gonna, which is great. You should absolutely do that, because
Yeah.
whatever version of having that dopamine allows you to do the thing that gives you other benefits, you should do that. That is like the problem is when uh you inevitably run into patches that are in between, right? That are and it's okay to take time off, but it's hard to not beat ourselves up when that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Like mentally, like, oh, I should be doing more.
Mhm.
Is always a thing. And that can be attributed to like just life in general. When you feel like, ooh, here's an hour to myself to allow myself to recoup or recover or breathe. Ooh, but I could do work. I could do work. That whole process is a rough downward spiral.
I'm
That
I'm so bad at allowing myself to do nothing, because I cannot show it, but I have this board here to my right.
mm-hmm.
Um, my head is always full with ideas on different parts of my
Yeah.
life, whether
Uh-huh.
it's TTRPGs or other things I'm working on, and so it's really hard to not feel guilty
Yep. Because
when
you see all
having
those
that.
things you could be doing right now.
I know. It's the same as with the scenarios last week. It was really warm here last week, or the last couple of weeks. So it was, I don't know what's in Fahrenheit, but it was over 30 degrees Celsius here. And I I thought, okay, I have to finish those scenarios, but but I just stopped working after 27 degrees Celsius, because that's too hot for me. Um, so it was very difficult for me just to allow myself to take out a chair, sit in the shade in the garden, and just read a book, because I
Right?
thought, okay, I need to finish those scenarios, and I have a game to prep, and I have
Yep.
my work to do, and I have I have a social life in a way as well.
Yeah,
And
or you think you did at one point, but you can't remember where you put it. Like it's
yeah, it's terrible that yeah, it's just then feeling guilty by
Yeah.
wasting an hour. It
What's
feels like
is what's
wasting.
really, and I'm you're not the only one. This is very common. I also suffer from this. What's interesting is that everything that snowball of like, ooh, I could do these things is like it's all theoretical, right? Like there's no way that in that 1 hour any of those things get completed, let alone all of them, right? You're doing
Yeah,
partial work at best. Uh,
yeah.
and the thing that's at least personally that I find that keeps the gear spinning is that I haven't decided. So the infinite of possibilities is roaming in my head for this period of time.
Hmm.
And the thing that is, I've been working on this for a couple of years now. The thing that has really helped me is choosing to not do anything, like putting it in as the task for my productivity. It's silly, but because if anytime I have conviction on what I'm supposed to do, kind of like when I get external stimulus for writing, I will do that till it's done, and I'll be great, and I'll hyper focus, and it'll be amazing. But I got to get to that point first.
Mm,
Otherwise, I could be doing this, or I could be doing that, or I could be doing this. Uh,
yeah.
and so I started basically when I work with clients, we literally schedule time where they're not allowed to do something in their week. But because it's a block of time, uh, it's an activity. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Totally makes sense.
but for myself, it's literally just looking at like, ooh, this period of time, I know I'm coming home from this, and I'm gonna have this other stuff floating in my head, and I won't know which one I'm gonna do yet. This period of time, I get home, I take a nap. I'm gonna go to
Mm,
bed. I'm gonna that'll restore, let my brain like turn everything into the back of my brain, and then I'll get up. It'll be foggy. It's fine. I'll eat some food, and then I can make a decision. Or I will see that I've already chosen something,
yeah.
and I just wasn't paying attention to it, and then I'll be able to focus on that.
Hmm.
But it's and this is I learned this through exercise as well, because the progress and development part of exercise is done on the times when you're not doing the exercise.
Ah,
because
yeah.
because the exercise is the effort that exhausts your energy, and it's the body's ability to rebuild that energy to be better or more or withstand more that makes the difference in terms of growth.
Yeah.
Um, so the battle between uh, oh, I'm guilty for not doing anything because I could be doing so much, really comes down to finding a way to isolate that spot as part of the process rather
Yeah.
than uh, uh, accidentally doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, totally. Because as I said before, for me, actually writing it down is only 10%.
Yeah.
Maybe even less. Um, the whole idea and the whole process and the whole sabotaging myself as well, just to come up with better solutions or better ideas. It's all been done beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So um, if I schedule a time for that, it was the same thing when I last year I had really trouble sleeping. I slept, I think, 2 hours a night. And that was because my head didn't stop. So I took 15 minutes before bedtime
Mm-hmm.
to write down, maybe a bit of journaling, but to write down everything that was stuck in my head, everything that I thought that could be an obstacle, everything, all the negative thoughts and all the negative affirmations that I was telling myself. And I put them down on paper just to get them out of my head.
Yeah.
So I didn't have them lying in bed when trying to sleep. Um, so taking that 15 minutes, half an hour before bedtime really helped to focus on sleeping.
Kind of like purging those thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. There is something to specifically with writing where and this might be a personal experience, but where like If I say it out loud, it doesn't count. Or maybe, if I say it in my head, it doesn't count. Like it's still in my head, but
Yeah.
somehow like by writing it down, it it leaves. It goes away.
Yeah.
uh,
It makes me, for me, it's if it keeps bouncing around in my head, I cannot grasp it. I
yeah,
cannot fully see what it
what
means, and
it
I
means
make
or
it
says
much
or
bigger than that it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
That's the same with releasing when the end comes, for instance, as well. I I released it, that pushing that button to publish it was
Yeah.
very difficult because I just thought, okay, I have written it. I'm not convinced this is. I think it's fun. I think it's fun. I hear people who've been playing it who have had fun, so it's fun. But there was this little voice in the back of my head, which is always there, um, that said, okay, nobody wants this. Why do you? Who do you think you are releasing this? Who you're? I'm always. I. It was very difficult to get over that voice and get over that kind of social anxiety. To just show the world, okay, this is what I made. It may not be perfect.
Yeah.
It may not even be fun. I don't know. But it's done. It's
Yep.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't actually now not really care what you think, but
You
for
care.
me,
You care a
it's out of
little
my
bit.
head.
Just a little
I
bit.
do care. I do care. I do care. I do care a lot. I do care too much. That's the
Yeah. Yeah.
problem.
That's the real answer.
But not to paralyze myself before pushing the button. That was what I thought. And it just became this, okay, it's done, it's out of my head, it's there, and I don't mind what happens to it. Of course, I do mind. And I'm really glad that it was fine and everything is good and I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying it. But
Did
yeah,
did the buildup of anxiety to the point of pressing publish and release, um, did that in any way make pushing publish or release on something else in the future easier?
um, I yeah, I think so because
Yeah.
when I did the scenarios, I was more confident um in doing that. Um, yeah,
So like when the thoughts of mistrust hit, you were less likely to be betrayed by them.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was less paralyzing. It was more like I've been doing also in different aspects of my life. I've been doing this thing that I want to. I rather regret the things that I've done than the things that I haven't done. I have done. I've stopped myself from doing things in the past which I maybe wanted to do, but was very anxious about what other people would think. Same as with pro wrestling. There were a lot of people who didn't. If you look at me, you don't think pro wrestling immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Listen,
so
all pro wrestlers are either carnies or nerds. Okay. You're
yeah,
so it's
a bit of both probably.
right.
And so I was very anxious about what people would think about it. But before when I was younger, it would have stopped me. I would have thought, okay, they don't want me there. I'm not going there. I'm not gonna put myself through it. It's gonna fail. Imposter syndrome all over the place, of course. Same as with game design. The game is with writing. Um, I always have that idea of why should I do it? I'm not good enough to do that.
Yeah.
But having those experiences, having those positive reactions, having that exciting feeling, that something that you made something, that you created
Yeah.
something,
No
that's
one can take that
something
away from you, regardless
that's
of
so
whether it's
cool.
good or bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. I had troubles public speaking since I was a child, and by just doing it and doing it and forcing sometimes even to do it, forcing myself to do it, um, got me to the point that I'm speaking to you now. It got me to the
Right?
point that I'm doing streams. Got me to the
Yeah.
point that I'm still not. There's still that bit of anxiety and still that bit of
It doesn't go
tension
right,
there.
right? The feeling doesn't go away, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's how you
Okay.
handle
So
it.
this is what kind of what I was hoping to touch on. Because we assume uh, where we like to assume that as we get better at things, that the things that prevent us from doing them get easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's not really the case. Uh, the truth is the sensation that prevented us from doing stuff stays the same amount of sensation,
Mm.
but our adjustment to that sensation gets stronger.
Yeah.
Which it's this again, it's the same thing as exercise, but it's like uh, the reason a lot of people are surprised to learn that they can like lift more than 100 pounds is because 100 pounds always feels like 100 pounds. That's not nothing, right? Or 50 pounds, whatever limit, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's if you see a 50 pound dumbbell in a gym, uh, and you go to pick it up, regardless of how strong you are, your body goes, I got to be careful. Like I
Yeah.
don't care if you're the strongest person in the world. There is if you're not paying attention, it's still 50 pounds against your force. That's a thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't believe or don't feel or don't trust they can do more than that because you pick that up and it still feels heavy, even though they've gotten stronger. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing with nerves and anxiety. The sensation of sweaty palms and ner- gut tension, that's always there leading into something. What we get better at is, like we talked about way in the beginning, um, our gut instincts kick in.
Yeah.
But we're raising the level of what those gut instincts are, which are things that we do without having to process them first. So the more times you give yourself the freedom to survive and not die while afraid, the better you get at operating in that state.
Yeah. Because my first reaction would be freeze, so not doing it at all.
Which is why, for example, public speaking is such a big thing. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you're frozen and you're trying to speak publicly, what are you going to say?
That was literally I just couldn't say anything at that point. I just totally went blank.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was saying. I didn't know what I should be saying. And by getting positive experiences, you realize, no, I'm not gonna die in this situation.
Yeah.
I'm still not comfortable with this situation, but it's not gonna kill me, or it's not gonna do something bad, or it's not gonna change. For me, was a big part. It's not gonna change the perception of people of me.
Yes.
Um, that's that was very, very important part for me to realize. if
Yeah.
if I do make a mistake, if I do something that's not perfect or not maybe up to standard or something like that, it does not change people's perception of me, hopefully, or
Right.
otherwise they're not the people I want to associate with.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but pick your crowd. So that's an interesting development that I've gone through for myself, realizing that it's a lot about my perception of things. As you
Oh, I
say, that
know,
if
right? That's
that,
so not fair. It's
that's so it's so horrible. There
it.
was a couple of years ago as well in my life. I had a burnout or bad period in my life, and it was mainly because I thought that I had everything society says you should want: steady
Yeah.
job, a wonderful partner. We were living together, started living together then. Everything's looked perfect, but I felt so horrible.
Because what's the
And
point, right?
yeah, what's the point? Where do we go from there? Society says that I have the perfect picture, and now
And
what?
right, and at the same time says keep going.
Yeah, yeah, you should want more. You should want, I don't know, children or pet or get promotion on your
Things,
work or
stuff. Yeah.
stuff, do things, get more wealth. But at that point, I realized, okay, for who am I doing this? Is this for society or is this for me? And I made the choice
Yeah.
to do the things for me. To do, and
Yeah.
the funny thing,
I'm so
the
glad you
funny,
figured that out.
but the most interesting thing is, objectively, nothing has changed over the course of these 7 years or 5 years.
Yeah.
I still have the same job.
Yeah.
I'm still in the same house that I live in with my partner, who is still the
Mm-hmm.
same partner. So objectively, nothing has changed, but my perception of it has changed. I'm fine with
Yes.
this.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy with where I'm at now, and
Yeah.
it
So
creates a
that's the thing.
space.
That's the
Yeah.
key. I actually wrote a little bit about this in my newsletter. Uh, which self plug you can sign up for at everydaysuperherotraining.com. Okay, so, um, but the shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. I got so excited about the plug. Uh, shoot, all the steam's running out of my head. What was the last thing you said?
About it's objective, but
Oh,
it's
it
also your
changed,
own
but it
perception
didn't.
of it. Yeah.
So this is what you're what in my words, what I'm hearing is developing the ability to be happy where you are as opposed to looking for happiness somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's um one, no one's version of it is going to be the same as anyone else's. Um, but in the newsletter, I talked about how we look at problem solving for skills and are very like there's a formula for I don't know how to do something, now I know how to do it, right? So which in the newsletter I basically mentioned that I give examples, but if you have an idea that you want to manifest into reality, there's just normally a skill or collection of skills you learn or put to use to develop the thing inside of your head coming out of your head. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and the more you practice those things, the closer the thing in your head starts looking like the thing out in reality. That's what getting better at something is. And so like if you have a story in your head, you're supposed to learn to write, and the more you practice writing the thing that is in your head, the more the thing in your head starts looking like the story that you thought it was. If you have a picture in your mind that you want to share with the world, you got to learn to paint or draw to find a way to connect that image to the outside of your head. In my world, if you want to get faster or stronger, there are movements or ways of doing skills that you develop to do that outside of your own body that then make your body able to do it. So you have an idea of what you don't know how to do. You find ways to work on doing it now so that later you're able to do it. There's never like I don't know how to do it and I know how to do it. That doesn't exist.
No.
My theory is that the idea of enjoying where you are now is also a skill, as is any intrinsically learned self-value. And if you don't know how to do that, you have to find skills or work on skills related to that idea now to be able to get there down the road. And it has nothing to do with chasing an external goal, right? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Hey, if I get this job, I'll suddenly be able to be happy where I am, because that can help the situation on a little practical sense, right? Like if you get this job and you're able to have a roof over your head and food in your mouth, a bunch of the other things that allow you to enjoy yourself are way easier. That is true.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fix the need to chase something to feel gratified. so the yeah. Anyway, that just what you were saying just tied me into that thought process
Mm.
of
Yeah, yeah.
so and it's
I totally agree
um
with that.
because even though externally nothing changed, a whole lot has changed internally for you and how you work and perceive within the world.
Yeah.
And that is not something that you can easily explain to someone else. You can't tell someone, "Hey, just be happy where you are," because that doesn't help anyone. That doesn't.
No, no, that's exactly when I was at my as I said, that mantra of going, or that motto of I I rather regret the things that I have done than the things I haven't done, is I can say it to you that something maybe will help you, or
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that works for me, and I don't have the idea that it will work for anyone else, because
Right.
everyone is on his own journey and everyone is on his own path, and everyone is at its own stage from getting from that A to B, being comfortable with who you are. Um, so what works for me doesn't necessarily work for anyone else. Um, but it's a fun, even though such a journey or such a discovery route is very difficult and very hard work and and sometimes really scary, and
It's yeah. I mean,
it's
when we
terrible.
learn how much our own brains the most of the trauma we give ourselves, uh, uh, and then you're going inside your own brain to work on yourself. Like you're basically wielding a double edged sword. And
Yeah. uh that's one of the most difficult things I've done, just getting through those times.
mm-hmm.
And the good thing is that even though it's not fun at that point in your lives, um, I had several of those times, but I always can see that light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah.
because last time when I had these feelings, or I had this depression, or um, I I overcame it. I came through it. I came out on the other side stronger, or a different person than I am, and I'm happy with that different person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what keeps me going in those times, or when I feel anxious about something, or when I doubt myself, or just these past experiences show me that, as I said, I'm still here.
Yep.
The things I do are there. I like them. I do enjoy doing those things. Um, so it gives me that confirmation that it works in a way
Yep.
for me.
That version of it worked for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's or that version works for that version of me at that time. It will not, maybe not work for me in the future, or but we'll pass that bridge when we get there.
Yep.
Um,
And it will inevitably you'll have to.
exactly. That's the thing, and that's why I also, with these projects, I do like that deadline, because I have to do it. I committed myself to it, so I have to do it. Even though that anxiety or whatever feeling um, is there, the deadline's extra motivation just to do it.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Um. Okay. Thought. Um. And I'm gonna ask a question, and I think I'll give my example because I don't know if my question is gonna make sense.
Hmm.
Uh. In that period of time, which there's not gonna be like one, oh, this is the thing moment. In that period of time when you went from being like, hey, I have the thing I'm supposed to have, but it's not working. To being able to internalize that process a little more. Are there or have there been specific things that you have now focus on that are different than before that help with that? Or is there a process of keeping your mind in the right space? My example is that I have two. that I hopefully can remember. uh, One is I work really hard on diagnosing whether or not I'm okay based on my state of mind. Whether it's so I teach this. I work my mental, emotional, physical health as one equal priority, and I treat them as if they are all whether or not I'm healthy or not.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, the one thing that all those any symptom, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, has that is in common with each other is the first thing to change is the positive state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if if I am physically ill, if I have a cold, or if my knee's aching, or if my stomach's grumbling, if I haven't eaten and my blood sugar has crashed, these make me more irritable. They make me. It's more likely that I am going to be harder on myself psychologically. It's more likely that uh, I have an increased sense of like um, people abandoning me, even if it's not really happening. Like these are things that uh, physically I can tie to um, something else being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless. So like if the minute I go, I my natural state isn't a positive state of mind, which is not saying I'm happy. It just my neutral thinking isn't a good place to be.
Yeah.
It means somewhere in my systems something is damaged or needs recovery, and
Yeah.
that's the signal I take for rest and time off and what have you. Regardless of if it's my knee, my stomach, my internal monologue, or whether or not I can speak English properly very well. Like these are all things because there are times when my brain can't articulate, and then it's time to stop.
Oh. Yep.
So
I
that's
feel
one
that.
is I learned that is if I focus on my health being tracked by my neutral state of mind, it covers the bases better than if I focus on each thing separately.
Mm-hmm.
The other is that I have switched from focusing on external achievements and more on experiencing things on an individual level. Um, and that has, I will say, meant that I do not work as hard as I used to at reaching certain things through goals. Because that the reaching the end of a tunnel isn't why I'm doing something. I'm not. It absolutely is why I don't have 100 subscribers yet. It's 100% why I go light and then dark on social media. Like I'm aware of all of that. Um, but at the same time, what I'm chasing is allowing myself to experience things as much as possible because that's what fuels my nerdiness. Is having that experience that fuels my desire to break it down and learn from it and do more. And if I don't have that fuel source, I don't have anything to be excited about.
Yeah.
And keeping that system going is uh, what fuels my internal desire of like, oh, this is good. This is my life. I like this. Have
Yeah.
you had that was a long explanation, but
Yeah.
are there versions of that for you that you have noticed from that period of time that have changed?
Yeah, very much actually, because I think that was that 5 year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a very bad place and I didn't know how to get out of that. And one of my friends asked me a very vital question. What makes you happy? Just give just choose a thing that gives you joy. What gives you energy? What gives you and the most um scariest thing that happened was that I had to respond to that question with nothing.
Yeah, because you didn't
Even
know.
the things I had no idea, no, but everything and as well, all the things that had given me joy before, theater, music, reading, writing, didn't spark that same joy. Didn't give me that energy.
Right.
Um, so I'm very aware now. It's I don't know. You probably know it. The subtle art of not giving a fuck. That book. It's a book
Say that one more
by
time.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Ooh,
I'm sorry
I do
if I
not know.
cannot
I do not
pronounce
know it, but I wanted you to say it
it.
again, just in case someone listening or watching also wanted to find it.
It's written. I have it here. That's why I look up a bookcase. It's written by Mark Manson,
That sounds
and
familiar.
he says it's this orange booklet. It really stands out in the bookcase, and he says you have time, money, and energy.
Yep.
These are the two fucks you can give, but these are limited resources.
Three.
Yeah,
Three.
yeah, you
Three.
have
Not two.
yeah
Three.
three that one. Um, you have if you spend your time or your energy or your money on something you and only spend it and not getting something back, at one point you get depleted. It's
Yep.
done. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with energy, for me, is that and time as well. But energy is the main thing. If I spend too much time on doing things that don't give me energy, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I'm
You need to
getting
eat.
I get to eat. I need to get that energy back. I need to because then I get in that negative mindset, and it goes downhill from there. And if I don't catch that in time, it's very difficult to get out of that.
Yeah.
Um, so I try to catch that before that happens. So I've made some deliberate choices. A lot of things that I'm an introvert. I do not like going to birthdays, parties, that kind of stuff. I like having interesting conversations with people, but not the chit chat.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
so I normally I would go because that's expected of me. That's a social gathering. You should go. But now I really decide if I want to go, if I have the energy, if there's people I want to talk to. I do not go because I think society or other people think I should go, but I go for me.
Yeah.
And the same is with uh, I create or I write or I design the things I that give me joy, that give me that which I think are fun, not something that's why I just don't design, for instance, Dungeons and Dragons supplements or adventures or whatnot, because
Because it's for you.
it's for me. I don't play that. I don't play D&D that much anymore. I still like it though, but it's I. There are so many other great stuff that give me more energy, give me more interaction with people, give me more
or this
satisfaction
or
as well.
the type of interaction you're looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, that if I spend time and energy writing one thing, I cannot spend that time and energy writing something else. So I'm very deliberately choosing where I spend my time and energy. Um,
Hey, kind of like choosing to not do anything.
yeah. Maybe I should add that to that list that I can do that.
Yeah, just because
Yeah.
if you leave it open to you could do other stuff while you're doing the nothing, you're not actually experiencing the doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because that because you know that taking that nap, having reading something light and not with a purpose or anything, if you grant yourself that time or decide to use that time for not doing anything, um, it will benefit you in the long run.
Yep. And I'll man, I'm gonna forget like three different points in my head. Okay, so this is a tangent that is related to a topic that I have brought up on two different episodes of my podcast. That is the difference between sleep recovery and rest. Uh, in that they are separate mechanisms for our well-being with different processes that if you get a good night's sleep do cross over, but they individually serve separate purposes. And the one that we get wrong is recovery. Rest is doing as little as possible to recover from trauma or overuse. Sleep is being unconscious. It doesn't matter if you're asleep or someone punched you in the face. If you're unconscious, that is sleep. Recovery is a proaction or proactive response or an activity that aids in your getting back to neutral once you have rested. It's the step after rest. Rest is can't do anything, need to let go. When you hit burnout, rest is walking away from the thing that lit everything on fire, and just letting it burn all the way down until it's run its course. And then from there, you don't come right back to it because you haven't refilled anything. Then from there, you put in the work to build the parts that allow you to be at a neutral state again, and then come back to it. And that recovery, specifically within the creative process, and everyone has again different responses. That recovery period is very important. Like you mentioned, if you're using your own thoughts to create worlds and stories and things, and you've done those stories and you've reached those points, there's nothing else in there. There's no, or you gotta, and
to replenish it,
right? And for me personally, I don't know about other. For me, I switched from thinking of myself as a computer from export to input. So my recovery stage in creativity is taking in as much as I can that is new and different. So watching new shows, binging new podcasts, going to new parts of the city, going to a different, like breaking up the routines that have my brain think in the same ways. And that allows the thoughts that I'm stuck on to sit in my subconscious and refuel and not be used. And that's literally, one, the recovery process for my creativity, but two, that's feeding my creativity.
Yeah, that's why I love running and playing TTRPGs, because for me that's recovery. When I'm before, when I got home from work, I was totally depleted. I couldn't do anything anymore. I didn't have any energy. I was even on a negative scale of that one. So, but now after work, I come home, I fix something to eat, and I go into a session. And afterwards, I still am tired because it adds focus.
You spent hours before that doing stuff. It makes sense that you're tired.
Yeah, but it's a positive
tired
way of feeling tired.
Yeah.
It's just because you get to create, you get the energy from the others, you get the energy from the other players, from the other people at the table, you get new ideas, exactly what you're saying. You get these inputs from other people who spark maybe a new idea or something you was back there somewhere but didn't know it was there. Some connections that go storyteller I was telling about for my Vampire Masquerade Chronicle. We were just laughing because we're creating two characters now for a chronicle we're going to be playing in. We're both going to be playing in, and we just said to each other, we're not good for each other in a way that the characters we've come up with now are so cursed. They're so we were amazed about what we are able to come up with together. And it just works off from each other. He has an idea and I go I work on that, and I add new things, and then he comes along and adds new things. And that's how I like an idea developing. I like that sparring. Even now, as I said, I'm an introvert, so I don't like chit chat, but I do like the working together, creating that energy together.
Yeah, we have the in the chat. Mimics and Misfits said, "No small talk, just big concepts, worldviews, and deep dives into passionate topics." And I agree.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Now the funny thing for me is that I am an extrovert. but I'm an extrovert with that gets easily sensory overload.
Mm,
So like I uh hate house parties. I hate large crowds. Because it's not focused. It's not
mm,
energy that I am sharing or siphoning. It is just chaos energy.
mm.
And it like it's a high, but it pulls instead of
Yeah,
feeds.
gives.
Uh, yeah. Um, and uh, it took a long time for me to understand this about myself. And
Mm.
in the isolation of quarantine, I learned that I don't give a shit about how the weather's doing. Like, why are we talking? This doesn't matter. There's no reason.
That's the conversation starter here in the Netherlands always.
Like
Oh, it's
I
really
am.
bad weather. I
Yep.
know. I can't look outside myself. Thank you very much.
No, I'm great. Like if it's the first 30 seconds of talking to someone I've never talked to before, that's fun
Mhm.
because they're a new person.
Oh.
But but if it's someone that I see on the regular basis, say at like
Mm.
work, um, there's a good chance that if we're like working next to each other, you're gonna feel like I'm ignoring you. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just perfectly happy not saying or hearing other people saying things right now. Let's just keep that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you say it for the 30 seconds. That's a new person. For me, that would be the I wouldn't even approach that person because that's a new person.
Right, and that's where
I'm
I am an extrovert. That's where.
exactly
So
that's the
yeah,
difference.
100%. That is I am for lack of a better term, I first dates are fun because it's not, even if it's small talk, it's new
Hmm.
and different in learning about this person, and that can lead to the topics that are passion and whatnot.
Hmm.
So the new person first conversation can be a wonderful time for me. It's after that listen, there has to be a reason that either of us make noise right now. Because
Hmm.
if you're just filling air, neither of us are winning. This is bad.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's so funny.
How are
So
you
funny.
doing? Yeah, it's been 2 hours.
Yeah, I know. Wow. Doesn't feel like it though.
I know. Well, that's because we're not doing small talk. We're
Yeah, I know. We're diving in deep immediately.
exactly. We've had a. I don't know that we had a point to the conversation, but everything has seemed to like loop back around like a number of times, which has been nice.
Mm. Yeah.
Awesome. If there, so from your experience of trying to find a rail again, if from your experience in having all that been said and shared, in your experience, particularly, I'm gonna tie it more again to when the end comes because that is something that you did in a finite period of time that now physically exists. Um,
Mhm.
um, what would you say to someone, regardless of what the project is, uh, to help them go from I have this thing in my head that I don't know how to do, to getting that thing out and about?
Ooh.
It can be
Um,
your personal thing that like drove you that made the difference because of you've had, as we talked about, there's there's ideas in your head right now, right? They're just floating around.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
what made this the idea that came out, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. I think that that's just by that also ties back into just making a choice. I had that game jam was the deadline was coming up. I really wanted to do that. So it was an intrinsic motivation for me. This was something I've been thinking about a lot, and I just did it or something. Maybe
Oh
it
my
just
god!
by it's just doing it by um yeah. I
So
think
you did
that's
it by doing it. That's amazing.
That sounds really weird, but it's
What?
yeah, it's just by because I know when something is in my, as I said, if something is in my stuck in my head and stuck in my brain, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So if I put it down on paper, and I see it in front of me, it's much easier to see where it's lacking or where it's fine, where I should leave it, where it's and by developing and but just by keep going. That's the thing. Just keep going.
Right?
At one point, you find you have something that you are happy with, or at that point,
Or want to see to fruition?
yeah, yeah. There's also it has also it also still has to do again has to do with the time and the energy. I've put so much time and energy into this. It would be a pity if it's not if I don't do anything with it. Um, so yeah, but it's at the same time forcing myself to do it just to just to get it out
Because
there.
that's the middle ground, right? After you've written out the initial parts that are fun, to get to the end, you have to go through the part where it's boring.
Yeah. Oh, that's so horrible. You have to that that's the same that was what I had last week. As you hear, I'm not a native English speaker, so I when I write something in English, I try to do it I do it at the best of my abilities.
Hmm.
I look up a lot of things. Luckily, I have friends who are better in English than I am, who can correct tenses and all these kind of things. But there will always be mistakes or be kind of Danglish, a bit of using Dutch ways of saying things in English.
Hmm.
Um, but and going through that and reading that and reading again and at one point you don't see any of those mistakes anymore.
You
Um,
can only edit for so long, right?
Oh, it's so terrible. It's just at one point I thought, okay, I think I covered almost all of it.
Yep.
And then I sent it to my friends, and they came back with such a list about, okay, you should change that and change that and change that. And I thought, oh God.
Yep.
And then I changed the things they said needed changing, and then I started reading myself by myself again. And then I noticed what did I do? Oh yeah, in one of the scenarios I wrote dexterity checks while I have named it in the system agility checks, not dexterity
Oh
checks. So
yeah, yeah.
these little details, um, it's it's a tedious process, and you have to same as with that as well. Just do it. You have to do it to make sure, or just to finish it. Because also the thing is, as long as I'm working on that particular thing,
Hmm.
I cannot fully commit to something else while
Right?
I have 10 ideas on the back burner.
Like the amount
So,
of guilt that would pile up.
oh, I know. It was just I have this Call of Cthulhu scenario I have been writing for over a year, I guess, but it doesn't get there. It doesn't get to the point because every time something else comes up or I I need to write scenarios because the game is a year old.
Yep. Well,
Um,
okay. So here's my follow up question to the first question that you answered beautifully. Um, you've uh, you have when the end comes that has been a project that you managed to get from beginning to end, and now you're at the point where after a year, you're adding to it and making revisions, um, which is proof one that you had to release it before you were ready, right? Like you
yeah,
couldn't, otherwise it would never have been released. And you're at a point now where you're able to come back to it and go, cool, this will make it even better than it was before, which is
yeah.
awesome. In the span of time of your creative history, I'm gonna just say since you found Tabletop Exclusive, that was about 2018, and that infused your brain with ideas. How many ideas have you not finished?
Do you have a second?
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah, a lot. There are a lot of ideas, and it also are not finished or are still on a list. I have this booklet where I write down any weird idea that I got, whether it's, and some of these ideas are still at that point, are still in that process, just a random sentence on paper. An idea, concept. It can be just as little as I want to write a correspondence game. I don't know why, I have never played one, but I'm fascinated by the idea, so I want to write one. Whatever it's about, I don't know. And there are ideas that are a bit further along. There was a big idea, which was actually the first thing I started working on, but grew too big for in my head to continue. So sometimes I get ideas that are much more than I can chew at that point.
Yeah.
So I have to readjust scope or just don't know what to do next. So I have learned to put them aside, start working on different projects, start working on different things, and once in a while come back to that first idea.
And sometimes you never come back to it ever again, and that's also okay.
And that's also fine. Yeah, that's how that goes. And
that is awesome.
Some ideas
I would have been really sad if your answer to that was, "Oh no, that's the only idea I ever had," and then just put it out. That would have bummed me out so hard.
I'm done.
because everything else that I've read and come to understand is that's not the case. And you might be the one person who's never had that be an issue. But the thing that I've learned from what not chasing, but watching and learning and listening, because I'm a nerd, I enjoy hearing people talk about the stuff they made more than the stuff, like taking the stuff they made. So like listening to long form conversations from filmmakers talking about making their films, like that kind of stuff. I'm a big behind the scenes DVD guy, or like the director commentary where I've seen the movie before. Just tell me what the scene is about from your perspective. And they all say that the people that have more finished products than you also have more unfinished products than you. And we kind of forget that in the maze of getting our work done. The game is trying and going and playing, and like, it doesn't matter how many times you start, because that ignites the ability to start again and again and again. There will be a point in which you find the middle part, and it's your will to get it done for whatever cosmic reason gets you to the end where you can argue about whether or not to hit publish, and then we can have that conversation. But the game only ends when you stop trying the new things. Yeah. And I think that's the part where people get lost, is this idea that if I have this idea, it has to come to fruition, or it's like, it's not an everything or nothing scenario.
That's very crippling for me to. It was the same here with When the End Comes. If at any point in when I was writing it, I would have had the idea of, no, I'm not going to publish it, I probably would have forsaken it way earlier. Because I do have that imposter syndrome for seeing all the other amazing games and content and everything being published, and it's so much. And so I have a backlog of each games bundles, all the amazing games I really want to play or read, but I haven't done that yet. So why would I add a little other thing to that pile?
Right.
But that's difficult to overcome. But for me, it was just like, okay, I'm getting that done, and I also knew that I would be feeling good if I hit that publish button or the release button. And it would give me also new inspiration for other things. As I said, I'm really bad at writing endings to things. The same as with that Call of Cthulhu scenario. I ran a playtest for that scenario, and I had part 1 done, part 2 done, and I didn't know how it would end. So I just ran that session without any idea of where it was going. None.
I mean, the players will help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just went with what they were offering.
Yeah.
And that's the same here. If you have an idea and you have it set aside for a second and you've been working on something else, maybe you come up with an idea for that second game that eventually doesn't really fit that second thing you're working on, but maybe fits perfectly the first thing.
Yeah.
It's all connected. It's not that my brain has these segments or this separation between now you're working on this, now you cannot think about that. It's always ongoing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. It doesn't just stop.
No.
No.
Even when I'm at work, I always think about whatever I'm gonna throw at my players next, or
Oh yeah,
whatever
yeah.
I'm gonna write, and all the way around as well.
Yep.
Things I do
Okay. So
here.
this is ties back to the energy cycle thing of like getting off work and being tired, but not really.
Yeah.
Uh,
It works. It works the other way around as well. Since I've discovered the TTRPGs and getting my energy back from that, I'm much better at what I do at work because I have more energy. Because I have
yeah, because
more.
it's well rounded.
Yeah, I'm one person.
You're right.
I'm not a different Sandra on work and at home. It's just me.
Yep.
So if it fails on one part, the other part will suffer from it. So it all ties in together.
Yeah. The I'm thinking of that because I know for me and my wife, we struggle with, look, we understand the concept, like there's doing the thing that you're doing when you're not at work will make you feel better even though you're tired, and then in theory that'll make you feel better when you're at work because you haven't just been at work. uh the thing that we get stuck with, um or at least I'm going to say myself specifically, is uh uh when we're at work and we're in that cycle, because we're not consciously thinking of our ideas, they just light up our brain, right? Like my like creative mannerisms are strongest from about 9:30 in the morning to about 11:30 in the morning.
Mm.
After I've had my coffee and talked to people at work, and like that's all, like, so it's all like instinct, and my instinct on that's really strong, and then I get home and it's gone, and it's
Mm-hmm.
and so like it's no longer just doing the thing, it's trying to remember the thing that I had in my head at the, and it's because I'm tired, because energy has been used, that is the point where it's very easy to get grumpy,
Mm-hmm.
where like, do I need a nap, do I need to like go right into working on stuff, like there's a that period is the hardest for me. That is
Yeah.
where uh the and I don't have an answer for anyone else that has the same issue, because it's different people need different things. Um, uh, um, I do argue that some form of movement can help if what you have been doing hasn't utilized movement yet. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I will also agree that the movement you'll do in that state will feel dumb and stupid because you don't want to do it. That is totally fair.
Yeah.
But it's not about that movement. It's about getting your brain off of whatever it's stuck on.
Yeah.
And I know specifically because my job uh, is already physical, that I
Mm.
have to be very careful about that.
Yeah.
I know that for, like, again, recovery, doing a workout that uses different movements will help me physically, but will it also further my brain being dead? Like, so
Mm.
I get stuck in that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's more um trying to realize that I'm not a different person at work as I'm at home. For me, it's more. I'm the most creative between 12 p.m. and 2 a.m. actually, which is
Oh, interesting.
I'm a night owl. It's so terrible because when it's always been that way. When I went to university, most work I got done between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. But you're still expected to be up and about, getting to college, getting to work at 7:30, something like that. So you don't get enough sleep or rest, or one of the two. And for me, it's been trying to incorporate a little bit of the things. It's easier because I have an office job. So I try to use the creativity or the creative energy that I get from the games and from writing, um, to fuel the writing that I have to do at work. I try to
Ah.
I try to use the things that I've learned by designing or by playing, to incorporate them in the way I look at things at work and I way I look at things when I have to write. I write brand applications for a theater, and I try to use that idea of that creative mindset to and getting into character and getting into the different characters, getting all these different perspectives. I try to incorporate that in a way into those grand applications, which is very funny because but it gives me energy. It's so much fun to figure out how to do that, how to not write a boring text, but to try to highlight what's important about this project we're working on, and to trigger the reader to say, okay, this is such an amazing project, we need to fund it. So I try to incorporate these different elements, use what I learned in one field of my life into the next, and that helps me kind of smooth over from one area into the next. Um, and hopefully that works. For me, it works in a way.
I like that.
I had fun talking to you, Julian. It's so cool.
Yay!